Hello, everyone. This is Bishop Nathan Hinckley on a really exciting night as I have received a name change, and I'm dressed for the occasion. What used to be called the Mormon Moron is now the Bishop's Interview. And I am so glad that I have an awesome panel of good people to join in this interview tonight. We have a interesting topic, I hope, and that is that of priesthood blessings. And this will be a hot takes episode, which basically means we didn't prepare a whole lot, that we're just going to have a good time and sound off a little bit. So let me bring in some good folks here. And let's see, we have Tom, Amanda, Ruth, and Mandy. Say hello, everyone.
Hello.
Yes, thanks for joining me. Let's see. Some of you will recognize Ruth. She was the second interview that I did, and it was really fun. We had some good times talking about Wicked and some other things. So thanks again, Ruth.
Did. Sure.
I'll go ahead and tell you that Mandy is a sweet person. She's my sister-in-law, and so I'm super excited to have her with us. Amanda is a friend from our ward from back in the day, but has moved out to Utah, and so grateful to have her with us. And then Tom, I actually don't know Tom, so why don't Tom, if you'll introduce yourself a little bit, and we might as well have Amanda and Mandy follow Tom. Ruth, well, heck, we'll have everyone introduce ourselves real quick, and just also include how Mormonism relates to your life, if you don't mind. Tom.
Sure. I was a member my whole life, married after my mission, 5 kids, was in the church until 2018. Catalyst was my son came out in 2012, and we worked to stay in the church for 6 years and tried to make it a hospitable place as we went, and eventually left in 2018. My wife is probably a little better known. She's one of the founders of Mama Dragons, which is a LGBTQ group for parents, mothers in particular, with the LDS Church. So they've done a lot of things. Love Loud was one of the things they were involved with. And I did a lot of writing on a website called nomorestrangers.org. There's a lot of that intersection between the church and LGBTQ spaces, and the harm that's inherent in all of that. So that's kind of where I have been at with Mormon. I've been out for probably 5-6 years.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. Where did you say you live now?
I'm in Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay, great. Amanda, will you introduce yourself a little bit there?
Sure. Let's see. I grew up a Mormon, raised in the church. I took my name off the records about 10 years ago because it got to the point where just my beliefs were clashing with the church a little bit, enough that they were going to excommunicate me anyway. So I just decided to just go ahead and leave. I wasn't offended. I know there's often a lot of assumptions about, well, you just wanted to sin, or you just wanted, you were offended, and none of that. I actually wrote a letter to my bishop about how nobody had offended me and I loved everybody and it was great. It's just, this is what I felt like I needed to do. So that's what I did. Grew up in the South, but we're living in Utah now. And I'm married and have 5 kids.
Awesome. Thanks, Amanda. When I started writing my thoughts about my deconstruction. You were one of my just great supports, and always added so much in what you would write and kind of cheered me on. So I appreciate that. So thanks so much. Mandy.
Hi, yeah, I'm Mandy Osmus. I was a Smith, so I am Nathan's wife's sister. I was born and raised in the gospel, and about 6 years ago, I became basically inactive, and just things that slowly were being put on my shelf made church less and less enjoyable. And then my only daughter, I guess I should say too, I married outside the church. So I spent a lot of the first few years of our marriage working really hard to try to convert him. And so our only daughter was born in '03. And I guess about the time she was 4 years old, we went through some really hard times in our marriage. And but ultimately, to fix things and make things right, my husband grabbed a hold of the gospel, and we ended up going to the temple, and I was able to be sealed to him and to my daughter. And that was very exciting. And I felt like that was supposed to like change everything for me. But I think that was the moment that I could let down my guard and start seeing things that bothered me about the church. And so about 6 years ago, when my daughter had entered her teenage years, I started remembering how hard it was as a teenager in the church, and feelings of not being enough. And I mean, it's hard enough in the world, and to go to church where I feel like everybody should feel enough. That was a place that always made me feel like I wasn't enough. I mean, it was no one in particular, but it was the way that I internalized it. And so always so much guilt and shame, and I really did not want that for her. And so that was, I guess, the biggest catalyst of causing that shelf to break. And not that at any point at that time I didn't know that the church wasn't true. I just knew that it was not working for me anymore. And so we became inactive at that time. And so it was just in the past well over a year or so that I've started learning that the church isn't true, and all of the problems. I mean, I just kind of went away silently and did my own thing. But I felt like I've had a lot of anger because there was a lot of inner still shame and guilt for me, and feeling like I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do, and I was letting my family down by not being there, even though I felt like being there wasn't right either. So it caused me a lot of, I think, anger towards not even the church, but towards God, and just what was expected. And so actually, I feel like when I did open up and start looking at the issues in the church and looking at the anti-Mormon literature, that's when I could breathe. And at first I'm in shock, but I really was able to take a lot of pressure off of myself and realize that it wasn't just me, that it was the church with the issues, and it wasn't necessarily God that I had to be angry with. And I don't know, just the whole thing was probably more of a relief to me to find out
Right.
that. So it's kind of different for me than it is for a lot of people, I think.
Awesome. Thanks, Mandy, for joining us tonight. Ruth, I shouldn't have suggested that you shouldn't introduce yourself. Maybe other people haven't seen our great interview, so take a second there.
I'm also from Arizona. I'm in a little place called Surprise, Arizona. I've been out of the church just about a year now, and I think I'm happier. It's not easier, but happier for sure outside.
Yeah. All right. So tonight I wanted to discuss, and we don't want to take more than probably another maybe 45, 50 minutes, or however it feels to us all. But I wanted to discuss priesthood blessings. And I think there's a lot to be said here. And so we'll see where this leads. But just as a little bit of a backstory, this is a picture of my son, my oldest son, Hiram. One of you has some noise in the mic. I'm not sure which one, but anyway, if you think it might be you. Anyway, this is my oldest son, Hiram. He was born 6 months early, and they had him inside a little, I don't know, they call it an incubator, don't they? Or something like that for kids, for little babies. And we reached our hands inside of this thing when he was just less, I think he was 5 pounds or something. And we gave him a blessing. And actually, some of the nurses that were in that room still talk about this event to this day. They're like, oh, I was there the day you gave your son a blessing. And then fast forward to about a year and a half ago, my wife, and this was as we were in, this whole deconstruction process, was hospitalized with some complications. And so I was kind of forced with, like, do I actually believe the priesthood stuff, or do I not? Do I want it? Do I not? I was kind of in a spot, because I didn't care if she had a blessing, but I wasn't seeking one. And actually, I probably had some hard feelings with some family members. So it kind of put me a bit in a situation. So just to give a real quick overview, in the Mormon belief, we believe that John the Baptist, as you can see here, appeared in 1829 to Joseph Smith. I've always just kind of took that as it just happened. And then we believe that Peter, James, and John appeared, and they gave, of course, first the Aaronic priesthood, and that was, he could do certain things with that, and then he could do other things with this priesthood. And so we want to talk about now, first of all, I never knew this, but there's a lot of historical problems with this account. I don't want to dive too much into that, but any thoughts from you guys on these two claims, first of all, of John the Baptist and Peter, James, and John?
I could just toss one thing out there. I mean, the one thing that gets me on both accounts is they are backdated, meaning we got to a point where we needed to assert authority. So we came up with the priesthood, and then we backdated that the event happened, with John the Baptist or with Peter, James, and John. But they're always backdated to make it to a certain authority at a later date.
Right.
So that's kind of the pattern with both of those is they're both kind of, oh, wait, we need authority. Let's backdate it to here and say it happened. And there's nothing to contradict it because there were only two people there.
Right. It's kind of the bread and butter of Mormonism. It either happened or it didn't. And if it happened, then we get stuff like this. So this is my priesthood line of authority. And matter of fact, Mandy, your husband's line is, didn't I ordain him? I think so.
I think so.
Yeah. So his line is the same as my line. And so we get this type of thing where it's like, see, here's the proof. Nathan Hinckley, Greg, all the way down to Peter, James, and John. And so we have this little tangible, piece of paper or document or whatever. And again, there's some great episodes out there that discuss what Tom was just saying about how it was backdated. And I don't really want to spend much time on that. I want to spend more time on how this affects families, women, men, how it affects, everyone. So, any thoughts before I go on just a little bit more here? I don't want to cut anyone off. Let's get into this next part, and I think this will open up quite a bit of conversation. So the men in our church have an opportunity to bless in lots of ways. Here's some of them: baby blessings, confirmation. These are times that you would actually go into, and I give you this blessing that, you'll do this and you'll do that, and you'll just start riffing, right? Baby blessings, confirmation, priesthood ordinations, blessings of the sick and afflicted, or for comfort, setting apart in a calling. I probably gave, I don't know, hundreds of these types of blessings over my life. Father's blessings, patriarchal blessings, dedicate graves. So the men are pretty busy blessing everybody. But the women, I came up with two, and the dedicate homes, that was something I used to talk about as a bishop, that according to the handbook, it didn't specifically say that it had to be men. I don't know if that was your all's experience, but that's the way that I read it. And Amanda actually pointed out in something, let's not forget the second anointing. And that's a whole nother ball of fun there that we probably won't dive into a whole lot, but there is an opportunity there, apparently, if you're lucky enough, if you know people, to get into that. But I think suffice it to say, it's basically a men thing. What do you guys think about that?
I think
if I could just toss in that, it's not just about blessings, though. It's in the church, they talk about keys all day long, and keys is authority, and authority is over people. and you showed that last thing where it's like this chain of authority. That authority gets you authority over other people. It's the same. Yeah, they can do blessings, but it's, setting people apart is setting people apart under your authority. It's a very, very hierarchical system.
I was just going to point out that in the temple, they say women do have the priesthood in the temple.
Yeah, I've heard that.
I remember when Oakes explained that. There's priesthood and then there's keys. It's like
there's power
like
and authority.
Giving you a wink, wink, nod, but you actually have no authority to do anything.
Right.
At least that was his path of justification.
Yeah.
Amanda, any thoughts on that? I know from some things I've read from you, you have some pretty specific thoughts and feelings on the fact that women are not involved in so much of this.
I have a lot of thoughts. I don't know which direction you want to go. I guess the first thing I brought up the other day was just the maybe the psychological, emotional effects of watching the men and your husbands and everybody be able to bless people. And you're, as a female, especially if you're a mother with sick kids or something, you're not allowed to. And you could say a prayer, but it's like you better be careful not to put your hands on them while you're saying a prayer, or to assume that you have any power of God to, do too much receiving of any kind of revelation or blessing. You gotta wait till you can call your home teachers or your husband gets home from work, or, you got to wait till a guy can step in and really do it. And you got to be careful that you don't cross any lines. And at least for me, I didn't realize how much that affected me, that kind of thing, until I started really deconstructing more in the past 10 years and realized how, I don't know, how just like my view of myself was really that I had no power. I had no power as a female. And if I did, it was because a guy gave me permission, to be able to do something. I didn't feel like I had any power much as a mother, as the head female in the house, to make decisions. I felt powerless to, help my kids in any big way. And again, there was really a feeling of like I had faith and I could pray, but it was like, I better be careful not to cross whatever that priesthood line is, like you better not do too much so you don't get in trouble.
Ruth or Mandy, did you guys have similar feelings from what Amanda has shared?
I know for me, it was just a hard situation because, there for many years, my husband was not a member of the church, so he didn't have the priesthood. And so, he's the man of the home, yet I'm the one who is the spiritual leader in the home, but I don't have the priesthood. So the priesthood's not in my home. And so, yeah, I mean, I never really questioned that myself. I was satisfied with, it's a big responsibility, and, maybe it's better to not have to have that responsibility on top of everything else. But at the same time, it was missing from our home. And I was doing so much in the church at the time that it shouldn't have had to have been missing from the home.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? Anything to add to that, Ruth?
No.
Okay. So I think we could probably talk for a long time about this topic, specifically about men versus women. It's obvious, and as has been said already, that everything in the Mormon Church is under a man. Even the Relief Society, which is a women's organization, is the bishop or will call the president and will actually I think approve the counselors, and it's unfortunate, but that is the way that it is until things change. And as we know, that everything is temporary.
One thing I wanted to just toss in that's right in line with what you're saying is in the Proclamation on the Family, there's this statement where it talks about men and women in the home, and like the man and the woman, men and women are equal. And then the exact next sentence is, but the man presides. And you can't be equal with two people if one of them presides over the other. That's almost the definition of not equal.
Right.
So they play this word game that is supposed to sound soothing and like, oh, but look, you're equal, but he actually presides. It makes, when you actually look, it's there in black and white, and I've read it every day, and I remember even there's all this justification every time it would come up in like elders quorum or some sort of meeting where now we have to dance around and make preside and equal somehow work when you're talking about two sentences that mean exactly the opposite. But that's the game that's played with priesthood all the time is, oh, but women have the priesthood, they get to hold their man or some nonsense like that.
Great point, Tom. Yeah, Amanda.
Yeah, and it's not really equal too. I remember in church it was always like, well, the guys have the priesthood, but the women have this godly ability to have babies. And that correlation was always drawn. But that doesn't even work. Like, every woman is not able to have babies. Every woman maybe doesn't get the opportunity to get married or want to get married. And a single guy can give blessings and have the power of God and bless the sacrament when they're, young, and a female can't. And a single female can't. Like, so this role that they're like, well, women are, they have this power of God or next to godliness. It just doesn't hold up when you start breaking it apart. There's not an even correlation. It doesn't work.
Right.
I think the church ended up trying to gaslight us women, believing that we didn't need it, that we had more than enough, that we were righteous enough, and the men needed it for their righteousness. I think that they taught us that, we believed it, and that's why it didn't bother us for so long, at least for me.
Yeah, I agree that's the narrative, that you're so good, you do it anyways, you serve and bless and do everything anyways. And all right, so there's this dynamic of male female that we could talk about for a long time, but let's talk more specifically about priesthood blessings, blessings of like healing or comfort or whatever. There's a lot of just logistical, just thinking of it in a logical way that I feel like is super problematic. This is what I mean. So, this is what I had wrote before. So I said that we have a prophet and 12 apostles that are just like Christ and his apostles on the earth. Every weekend, they're in some different part of the world, right? Organizing a stake or doing something. Yet, these men who have the authority of God, is what we're told, spend zero time out in, I don't know, a children's hospital. Like this week, you've got 15 men and they spread out and they all go to the different stakes all around the world. Why are we not taking one day to walk down the halls of the children's hospital, giving blessings? No, we're sitting in a church with nasty sisal carpet all around, and we're leading these meetings that mean nothing really. We're not giving blessings. So it's just thinking about it. Why did I even mention sisal though? But what I'm trying to say is it doesn't make sense. Why are we not out blessing if we believe that it is a power to bless? Thoughts?
They don't want to promise anything that they can't actually do.
Speaking of that, if you guys have not seen the Mormon Stories episode of, I think it's Donna Showalter is her name. It's amazing. She goes to, I hope I'm getting the name right, and it's one of the most popular episodes. So if you just go most popular, it's right there. But she goes to Elder Holland, and at the time, she wants him to bless her child who is gay, and she wants him to bless the gay out of him. And Elder, of course, we know how ridiculous that sounds, but for her at the time, she thought, well, this is going to keep him from the gospel and keep him from heaven. And you say it's a sin, so that this is bad and it's a choice. So come bless him, and really kind of put him on the spot. And he ended up having to say exactly what you just said, Ruth. We can't. And it's actually an amazing kind of like saying the quiet part out loud, kind of like acknowledging we can't. So I guess that's kind of what I want to talk about. I mean, I think all of us can probably talk about sometimes that we feel like, or at least at the time we felt like we were healed or our loved ones were healed. Does everyone sort of agree with that? Amanda, yeah. Ruth, yeah.
Mhm.
So how do we deal with that then? When we pull on these times when we're like, well, there was this or there was that. And while you're kind of thinking about that, I'll just say there's people in my family and Mandy's family, after a blessing, they'll be like, oh, what did he say? What was said? And almost like they want to write down the words. And, it almost gets like we're, commanding God or that we're taking upon ourselves this authority to actually cause these healings. And I don't know, I felt really, really strange sometimes. And I don't want to get into specific people of the family, but how do we deal with this whole idea about blessings and healings and things like that?
I wrote something down when we talked about this earlier, and I said, what I once saw as evidence of divine power has now become a source of questioning and doubt. While I still hold onto the belief that miracles can happen, I no longer believe that they are tied exclusively to LDS priesthood power. Because I've had experiences in my life that I can't explain away, where I've had medical doctors say, I'm not religious, but I think that a miracle just happened. And I told you that I think that kept me in the church, even with all my shelf items, because how could I explain away a miracle? Because surely it was because my husband and my dad had the priesthood that I was blessed. And I had to be able to say, well, I could still be blessed. Whoever God is could still bless people who are praying and have faith in that ability. And I don't think it has to necessarily come through the authority, because I don't even know where that authority actually came from.
Good point. Anyone else?
I've got a lot of thoughts around this because I in my church life, I loved the church. I didn't leave because I didn't love it. I loved it all the way. I felt influenced. I felt the spirit. I felt had all sorts of really powerful blessings that I received, that I gave. And so finding a context after leaving was really a journey, and very hard. And I think the easiest way for me to put it in my own context is the church tries to create an exclusivity about a relationship with God, an authority that you have to have from them. And being out of the church for 5-6 years, the only thing I've experienced is how expansive all of this is beyond the bounds of a man, where women have equal or greater and different types of authority and power and intuition. That is, I get a lot from so many other faiths and traditions that have so many of the same types of spiritual patterns in them. It's only been expansive, and really, in retrospect, the church was just putting their own sort of handcuffs on all of it to create control around it. And once I got past the pain of it all and realized it was even more, it's been only good things since then. It's been really unlocking all sorts of opportunities and realizing that this was just limiting me. All these rules and regulations around it were only limitation.
So, I want to read a couple. This was a comment from a friend who who's a doctor. And he says, at their best, priesthood blessings facilitate serotonin-mediated group catharsis. I have no idea what that is, but I sort of get it from some of those words. At their worst, they provide self-aggrandizing men the opportunity to elevate their social status, promising things they have no control over, preying on folks during their darkest hour. Stuff like, you will live to see the second coming and never experience death. I think we've probably all remember hearing that in our church history. But then the other part is, you will be healed if you have sufficient faith. And he says this is non-medically trained nincompoops shifting guilt of death and illness onto victims and their families. I'll be honest, I've given a lot of blessings. I've gotten up at 2 and 3 a.m. From a phone call of someone, Bishop, we need you to come over, and I'm not complaining. I did it, and I thought I was doing the Lord's work, and I would get up and put my tie on, and this is the only time I'm ever wearing this thing for tonight. But I'll be honest, whenever someone asks me to give a blessing, I immediately started thinking, what am I going to say? Like trying to plan it out and basically saying, okay, God, this is what I'm going to say. And if you don't want me to say this, you better stop me, kind of trying to figure out what am I going to say.
Nathan, I have a question for you, because you're talking about your prep before. How much of your thought was also along the lines of, am I worthy to give this blessing?
Yeah, that's a good point, Tom. And that's kind of where I wanted to go. So first of all, I would say things that were kind of ambiguous, almost like if you have the faith, and so you never can be tied down. Well, you said this. You kind of learn to just say gray area stuff, just don't overpromise, but you don't want to underpromise and have them feeling I didn't really realize it at the time. I see it now. I'm like, yeah, that's what I would do. I would kind of plan out, to where just make them feel good. And I mean, I never felt that I was being given words to say, if that makes sense. I just kind of said what I felt like was not going to make me look like a fool. And so the other part of that, and then I'd like for all of y'all to respond, is what happens, and we've all heard of cases where something's promised and it didn't happen, right? And they died or whatever. Just think of the guilt that, okay, number one, if a female's holding her sick child or that just fell or got in an accident or something, she's feeling like, I can't bless my child. I don't have the priesthood. That's number one. Number two, the male, let's say it's the male, and he's not, like Tom was saying, he's not perfectly clean, right? He messed up. He did whatever. And so he's like, oh, I can't bless my child. It's just the guilt and the shame he's going to feel. Or let's say he does bless the child, but something terrible happens. Now what happens, say they die, and he's like, oh, it's my fault because I wasn't clean. I mean, there are so many examples of where this is just a psychological, abuse, right? Or am I wrong? Am I missing the mark?
I kind of have a different context that might inform this a little bit, because I do a lot of energy work. I specifically work with Reiki as an energy practice. And I think if you just get down to the kind of the minimum building blocks of what it does for a person, the quote you mentioned had something about serotonin. I would just make it a little easier. If you take two people, same illness, One of them is depressed, doesn't think they're going to recover, is not connected to people, versus a person who has hope. Their body is not depressed. They're leaning into their, doing as many of the good things as they can. You have two people in very different energetic spaces. It's not just in the brain, because the brain's driving the body as well. And you can be in a state of healing, or the brain can physically depress the body, can depress the immune system, it can make you in a very bad state. And whether you're in the church or out of the church, things like this, where someone comes with love and intention, and even if they're the worst, you got to be honest, there's some people giving blessings who are awful at it. And there are other people who maybe have a spiritual gift and a connection where it's maybe something more. But at a minimum, I think what it's doing for a person receiving a blessing is getting them into the best possible state, whether it's subtle energies, the right cocktail of hormones that is positive, that will get them to a healing place. You talk about things about cancer, and if it's 50-50, what's going to be the difference that gets you from A to B in a place of healing? That's almost intangible. That you're talking about in energy work, they call it real subtle energies, where it's it's not something that you're going to be able to do a study about. Well, who all was in their best self when they're going into it? Well, you have a lot of studies about how depression impacts people's healing. If you're depressed and you're trying to heal from something, you may never heal. So I think this is why you see in almost every hospital there's places for people to pray and to get hope and to drive themselves to a higher state of healing. And it's that level of it is not fictional. In fact, if you talk about placebo effect, a lot of people think, oh, placebo effect it's the neutral control group where nothing's happening. Well, what they don't tell you is placebo groups always perform better than groups that got nothing. So if you gave them like a sugar pill, always the placebo group performs better. And it's only because the mind was like, oh, well, this should be doing something. So even placebo effect is better than no effect. And if it's when you're talking about serious illness where it might be more visible, what does 5% better look like? I mean, maybe it's not fully healed, but it's better than nothing was. So I think there's a lot of intangibles of intention and healing that come along with blessings that affect the mind, body, and spirit of people, that really contribute to healing, that are intangible.
Great points. So you mentioned,
can I say something?
Yep.
Along the line that Tom was saying, that same energy that you're coming to it with, I think is where Nathan was coming from. If the person who's giving the blessing doesn't feel worthy, then they're not bringing that kind of spirit with them, that kind of energy with them. And I think when my son first left the church, he had just had his first child, and he said, I don't understand why God would not let my wife, let me, even if I wasn't worthy, ask for help for my child. And I think of that often, just even with my own kids. If they needed something from me, I wouldn't say, well, you haven't really been that great, so why don't you go back and fix yourself and then come back and ask me when you're in a better spot. Which I think is what the church does when it says, well, you're not worthy. You're not worthy to give your child a blessing. You're not worthy to use your priesthood. And I think that's damaging. And I think that energy that you're talking about, Tom, just keeps getting shot down a little at a time.
Yeah, great point. Anything else from Mandy or Amanda there?
I'd like to share a couple of situations and priesthood blessings, I guess. I guess probably the very last priesthood blessing that I ever asked for. I'll start with that one. And at the time, my husband was pretty new to the priesthood, and I wasn't sure about his faith yet in that priesthood or in himself, his confidence. So what I wanted, I really felt like I needed someone who was experienced, had strong faith in the power that they held. And and I'll just tell you what it was is we have our one daughter, and I'm a nurse, and I've worked most of my life, and so I had decided that we were ready. We wanted to have another child, and it wasn't happening for us, and it wasn't happening, and it wasn't happening. And so I was going through all these emotions of, was it my fault? Was it because I didn't marry in the temple, even though now he's in the church? And am I still being punished? Am I not righteous enough? I'm working, I'm not in the home. Even though financially we needed that, but I actually quit my job and we were struggling to get by. But I felt like maybe if I cut that stress and that guilt and shame, and I was doing what I was supposed to be doing, I was in the home, just maybe some of those things would help, because stress is not good for someone who is having fertility problems. So kind of my last straw was I wasn't ready to jump in and try to do in vitro fertilization, because some people don't have a whole lot of luck with that, and it's really expensive, and it wasn't something really that we could afford, and I sure didn't want to try to sacrifice and do that if there was other things that the Lord expected of me for that to happen, and medical intervention might not help anyway. And so I had asked for a priesthood blessing. I decided to go to someone who was close to me, who's a member of our family, who I had known that had a child who, when they were very, very young, was showing some symptoms and maybe even had a test that showed up possible diabetes. And so he had told the story several times that when he got ready to give his child a priesthood blessing, they were doing like the fasting, and they were going to go in the next day and have that checked, have some further testing done. And so he had give the child a blessing, and he said that he basically wasn't asking the Lord, that he had the power, he had God's power to demand it, and that's what he did. And so, of course, the child didn't have diabetes. The tests all came back normal. They don't even know why that we ever even thought that, why it ever showed up that maybe she had it in the first place. And so it was an answered priesthood blessing. It was a healing miracle. And so, hey, that's who I need. That's what I need. And so I went to this family member, and I realized that this was their child, and this was important to this person, that they were willing to not wait during the blessing to hear what it was that the Lord wanted, that he was going to demand it. But hey, they're a family member of mine. They know how important this is to me. And this is who I want to give me this blessing. And so I went over, and he laid his hands on my head, and he continued to tell me how much my Heavenly Father loved me, and danced around some of these normal things that you might hear in a blessing, but nothing. It was crickets on the fertility issues, on being a mother issues, on what kind of direction, if, even if that direction was to direct me towards a doctor, nothing. And so I left that priesthood blessing feeling defeated and feeling like it was an absolute waste. And just completely not understanding, because, whether it was the priesthood holder that was giving it to me or whether it was God, I got nothing. I got nothing from it other than God loves you. I know that. Heavenly Father loves me. I know that. I've known that all my life, but I need some answers here, and I got nothing. But let's rewind. When I was had just finished nursing school and I was going in to take my state boards, I was very, very, very nervous and afraid that I would not pass them the first time around. We had practice tests when, like, at the end of the school year that year, right before graduation. I had been really sick during those practice tests, and I had done really, really poorly, and had an instructor, one of the instructors, he was not a very friendly, nice guy. He was very blunt and very opinionated. And so it was my luck that I drew him to be like do my exit interview. And he basically told me I would fail my state boards, and that if I didn't do a whole lot of studying, that I would never be a nurse. So here I am graduating from nursing school, and my instructor is telling me this. So I worked all summer. I waited until the end of the summer to take my state board, and I worked all summer long studying and taking more practice tests. And then the morning before, I had my dad give me a priesthood blessing. And so when it was over, I was told that I would be able to be calm and to bring back to my remembrance all the things that I had learned throughout nursing school and all the studying and all that I had done since then. And so when the blessing was over, I felt so calm and so wonderful, and I felt like that it was going to be okay. So I went in, and me and my sister, my older sister, who was already an LPN, we went through RN school together, and she was already a nurse, and we went in, and with the nursing state board test, how that goes is that it basically, the time that it takes you to take the test and how many questions you get depends on how you do in the beginning. And if you're kind of staying on the borderline, it may continue to test you and give you more questions to give you more of a chance. If you're doing super bad, it'll cut off early. If you're doing super good, it'll cut off early.
Yeah.
And so my sister cut out early. And so she left out, and I was like, and we had rode together, and I was like, oh, great. She's going to have to wait for me for quite a while because she finished really early. And so I went through a few more questions, and boom, mine cut off. And I was like, oh, gosh. I don't think I did bad, but this shouldn't have went off that soon, so maybe I did. So, it even surprised her that I got out so early, because I was just like 5-10 minutes behind her. And when I got my letter in the mail a couple of weeks later, I had passed. And so I gave a lot of that credit for the priesthood blessing. And
For your dad.
Yeah, for my dad and the power of the priesthood that he had, God's power. And so now I know that it probably was, but maybe not for the reasons that I thought at the time. And, I think it is because it did calm me. Was it God that calmed me, or was it just the feeling that I had more people on my side and pulling for me, and then that I did have him helping me? That's what calmed me, and being calm and focused helped me to remember the things that I need. Now I see it very differently. And whether it had been a priesthood blessing or a circle of friends giving a prayer, or if I had known how to meditate, do other things to help me to focus and bring in positive energy, it probably would have done the same thing. It would have probably been the same result. But at the time, it helped solidify what the priesthood could do. And so it was a very, very stark contrast between that and the last blessing that I asked for from someone that I knew. I just knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that he had the power and the faith to, if not heal my fertility problems, to at least give me some direction. And I got neither. So
you bring up some, first of all, thanks for those two accounts, very personal accounts. And, but you bring up some interesting points that definitely would love to hear if anyone has any thoughts about. Number one, so is there any problem with this whole notion in the Mormon church of priesthood blessings? If maybe they're not actually God's power, but maybe, they're inspiring you, making you feel good, whatever. Is there really any problem, or is it a net positive thing? Any other thoughts from you guys on that?
I think for me, it goes to integrity. If they, I would say that since leaving the church, I've realized what a core value integrity is in my life. And if the church is telling me that they have the power and authority to bless me through God, speak his voice for him, then they should be doing that. So for me to just say, well, it's just a positive energy and, it's all going to be okay, whether it works because it's the power or because if it's just some good vibes. I think for me, if you're going to say it's authority from God, then it needs to be authority from God.
I think I kind of fall in that same camp, Ruth. I think you and I are kind of similar there. Any other thoughts, Tom or Amanda, on that idea?
I think if you look at the negative aspects of priesthood in Mormonism, it is the control aspects of it. It's like you have to come for the blessing from me. It's like even in your household, it's like, well, can your dad give the blessing, or can there's like even a line even within your own family, or which takes you away from the fact that post-Mormonism, some of the best and most wonderful healers I've ever come across are women, spiritual healers, and so the limitation of priesthood to just men, again, you're trying to limit all of this and control it as if you're the source of it, even when it's readily available in much more dynamic and beneficial ways. You mentioned meditation, and that's like the most neglected aspect of Mormon faith and practice. There is no meditation at all. Maybe prayer, but there's no guidance on how meditation might work. And there's clear benefits to meditation, both spiritually and in daily life. And so there's all sorts of gaps. I think the biggest is the control and the limitations of it. It can only fit in this box. And yet it's so expansive beyond that. And if you actually follow spirituality, it'll carry you out of the box anyway.
I think the closest the church comes to meditation is using the word ponder.
Or ponderize, if you're going to copyright it.
Right.
But I think even with the pondering and prayer, I mean, all of that is centered around what God can do for us. And I think that sometimes minimizes how strong we are and how capable that we are. I mean, it was just like that blessing all that information was in my head. I had worked really hard to be where I was, to be going to take that state board. And did I need help with to get in focus? Yeah, but it wouldn't have been like if I had known meditation, maybe
there's other ways.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I feel like meditation comes from within. You're not asking for help from above. You're bringing that help from within you, which is possibly where it's coming from anyway.
Mm.
And prayer is just a different way to center ourselves to where we can focus and calm ourselves.
Yeah, great point. Amanda?
Yeah, I was just thinking about some of them maybe like less desirable or frustrating or hurtful blessing experiences that I had. And I think a bunch of it maybe relates to what Tom said, that there's some ideas in the church, like in my experiences in life, I can't discount some of these really, I guess you could say, spiritual moments in my life in relation to maybe blessings or even healing, like healing where I don't have this issue anymore. I don't have to take this medicine anymore. Big stuff. Lost my train of thought. But I've still, since leaving, also had similar experiences with group healings or, other blessing type things. And so looking at the helpful things and the hurtful things, I think there's hurtful things in the church in relation to this idea of, can we bless somebody somehow? Can we heal? Can we shift something about somebody? Because in the church, there are all these rules, like women can't. You can't participate in this type of activity. Men can. And then there's these ideas about like, well, a guy's been ordained to the priesthood, so it's an automatic kind of that he can. And some guys come in there with the blessings thinking, well, because I have the priesthood, anything that I say is right. Anything that I say is God's word. And then there's, like the ego gets in there, if you want to call it that. And I've had blessings where it's just like kind of a misery to sit through them because I'm thinking this guy is just totally off. Like, it's just totally wrong. This is uncomfortable. This isn't feeling good. It's just not okay. And then I've sat through Mormon blessings where it's like, yeah, something is going on. And what is it? And being out of the church, I've sat through blessings and healing type things with women where children are there praying and have hands on people. I studied Reiki. I studied with a shaman. I study yoga and Hindu philosophy and all these kinds of things. And in all these cultures and all these different experiences, I feel like there are more tools, if you want to call it that, more tips on how to participate in something like that, like meditating and focusing, and how to be like, if you want to call it a hollow bone or a tube, or like how to get your ego out of the way and connect with and listen to whatever you want to call it, like this life force that's in everything that keeps it alive, the higher self, God, the universe, whatever you want to call it. And I feel like in the Mormon church, there's not tips and tricks on how to connect with whatever that thing is that like helps us out, this love that's between us, this focusing, this intention for each other. And so I feel like that can cause some, I don't want to say damage, but sad experiences, sad unfulfilled expectations, frustration, dynamic issues in the church. When you can find some help and better ideas and tips and tricks in other cultures and outside the church, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I loved all of that. And I was just sitting there thinking, when I was in church, I I'm embarrassed to say that I kind of scoffed at some of those things that we've mentioned, other ways to heal or to bring peace, even, stuff like yoga. And I just kind of thought, oh, that stuff, that's not the priesthood. And I just love the fact that I no longer am that way. Like, if it's important to you, if you find benefit in it, and, you mentioned the shaman stuff, the Reiki. I know Mandy has been starting to study a lot of these other types of things that she has interest in, and I no longer discount those things. I love hearing about alternative ways to heal or bless or be calm or whatever it is that there is out there. So I think it's wonderful. Any other thoughts on that topic of kind of like alternative ways other than the priesthood to gain some sort of benefit?
I was just going to make a comment towards your previous question was about harm and things that come from the priesthood, in particular the Mormon structure of priesthood. And another one of those aspects that really just dawned on me is that all answers lead back to the church, meaning if you're healed, it's because of the blessing. If you're not healed, you need to be tested more. There's already a prescribed answer that will fill whether you get healed or not healed. There's already an answer for that. There's already an answer for, well, God's not doing it because you need to be tested further. Or, I thought about Mandy's story. It's like, do we credit the blessing, or was it Mandy who actually did it and went and did the test and, had the presence of mind and actually did the work?
Yeah.
So now it's deflecting credit away from her performance.
Of who deserves it. Yeah.
Right. All of the answers are that either the church made it happen and the blessing was worked, or there's already prescribed reasons for why it didn't work, which all deflect you away from when you're suffering problems, searching for answers. Those don't help you. Those just become circular arguments to support the church or to get caught up in things that are completely outside of what you need to be handling. And that's really a harm that comes from priesthood blessings, is because even the answers are prescribed. Has to go one way or another way, because you'd never give a blessing if you knew it was something that the church wouldn't approve or recommend or say. Yeah. Even though that might be the direction that needs to happen. Like giving someone a blessing is like, oh, the best thing for you is to leave the church.
Right. So the way that I describe what you're saying is that the church claims our spiritual experiences. Whatever happens, yep. That's we get the glory. If something bad happened, either you didn't have the faith, or most likely, that's just God's plan. Or
your priesthood, whoever gave you the blessing masturbated at some point in the last 10 years. In which case,
or we could get into the whole Bednar, do you have faith not to be healed? And that opens another can of worms. So yeah, I no longer allow the church to claim those things, and not only do they claim them, they sell them back to you. So they claim your experience and then they'll sell it back to you for,
or you're not getting blessed because you didn't pay your tithing.
Right. So
something that Tom said, he said something about getting outside of yourself, and it makes me think that how much the church, because we were taught that the natural man is the enemy to God. Am I breaking up a lot?
A little bit, but we hear you.
Okay. I think because of that, I'll speak for myself, didn't trust myself. why would I trust myself when my inner self is an enemy to God? And I think the biggest change that I've experienced over the last year is that I listen to myself, I listen to my body, and because I've been able to do that, I don't have to worry about what the church is selling me, buying from me, taking from me. I can listen to myself. And I think the church did a really good job of helping us all to not trust ourselves.
Yeah, I love that.
I agree with that. It also, I feel like the priesthood blessing thing and the way that they talked about how if you have the priesthood, you also can't do anything for yourself with it, because that somehow is bad and selfish. So then you set up a dynamic where guys are not allowed to use whatever this healing priesthood of energy, priesthood energy of God thing is. They can't use it to help themselves at all. You have to get somebody else. And then women can't have this priesthood healing energy anyway. So they're like totally stranded. So you then end up, especially as a female, I think, or I did, there's this conflict. Like, am I even allowed to be healed? What if I feel the power of God or something? I guess I could pray and be healed. And I did that sometimes too, but it sets up, I feel like, this kind of helpless dynamic kind of maybe among everybody. Like, you don't have an individual power to go forth and make big changes or be healed or receive revelation for yourself. You got to call your home teacher, or you have to ask your dad, especially if you're a girl. You got to go get somebody else's help, and everybody always has to go outside of themselves and get somebody else's help, because the power of God doesn't work by just coming to you and then you use it for yourself internally, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Apologize for some of that feedback. I muted a few, but only to try to fix the problem. Just, I guess, a couple finishing thoughts that I have. There's been studies done in predominantly Mormon areas of are they more healthy? Are they experiencing more healings? Are they in the hospital shorter times? I mean, they have dissected this every way that there is to dissect it, and the results, according to everything that I've seen, come out absolutely normal across the board. There's no benefit, according to what I've seen, as far as giving extra, benefit to those people receiving Mormon priesthood blessings. And I do not believe that a man in Utah is going to have any more luck blessing his daughter than a woman in wherever. I no longer believe that. But 2 years ago, that would have been an absolute, I wouldn't even think of such a thing. But that doesn't align with, with my line of thinking anymore, for certain. Can we spitfire just a couple other things? We've already mentioned a lot of them, but just other ways that people might find what the priesthood blessings tend to offer, which is healing or comfort. I know Amanda teaches yoga. Is that right? And that would be something that's kind of along those lines, correct?
Maybe. I mean, yoga
Maybe.
can be a controversial topic in the Mormon circles or Christian circles, but it
Okay.
has a lot to do with connecting with yourself and finding a oneness with yourself and the universe and everything.
Okay.
There's a lot of misconceptions about that you're worshiping Hindu gods or something when you do it, but it's not about that. It's really a self-care, self-introspection thing.
Okay, well, that to
Along
me,
with
that's
meditation. It's like a form of just moving meditation.
okay. So yoga, meditation. Just let's spitfire just some things that either we personally believe or that we know of in our that offer what we used to think priesthood blessings offer?
So I have an interest in crystals or rocks or minerals, stones. Um, it just interests me. I can't say at this time that I have noticed any huge differences having them around, but they are really pretty to look at, and they inspire me a little bit. They're
Well,
shiny, and sometimes the colors change in them, and depending on the lighting and stuff. And so they do just have kind of a calming. And there's different things that I don't know a ton about them yet, but that they can affect for those who do Chagra healing. Crystals can be used for that, and so there's an.
So that's where my
I'm not
wife got
used
it
a whole
from.
lot, but yeah, they're pretty.
You've been talking to my wife, I
They're
think.
pretty. I do know that.
Okay, so the crystals, and then let's name off some other things.
They're pretty and they're fun.
Yeah,
for sure.
absolutely. Anything else that we would name?
I just wanted to mention that a lot of, when you talk about priesthood blessings, you're talking about divine intervention coming to you, right? An outside in type of work as far as healing. I think a lot of Eastern practice, like Amanda was talking about with yoga and Qui-Gon, and there's a lot of really physical practices that are very spiritual. I mean, the closest and really the only thing Mormonism has is maybe fasting as a physical practice that has a spiritual aspect to it. But a lot of the body is really connected to how we feel, how we're, there's a lot of spirituality that's felt in the body. There's a lot of wonderful symbology that's out there in crystals or in Mormonism with crosses and temples and everything in between, that people look to. But in all of those cases, it's what you believe, it's what the mind is going to tell you is connected to this thing. I believe in Jesus, or I believe in this blessing that I will be healed. It's the mind guiding the body through the healing. If it's symbology through crystals, I have this crystal that's going to, make me feel better. Well, that's at least a focal point for the mind and the body to focus on. I need to heal. And so all of these are tools. I think Mormonism is just a really limited toolbox of things. And I think if there's anything that's, because a lot of people coming out of Mormonism is like, now there's no toolbox, it's all bullshit. And on the far side, there's actually there's a world full of tools, and it almost doesn't matter what you pick. It's whatever intuitively is going to align with you and work with you that will empower you to have more positive and joyful life. That's it.
Oh, yeah. I love that. Love that, Tom. Well,
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead,
agree.
Amanda.
That's what I've come to. That really depends on the person. And so if Reiki helps you, if yoga helps you, if meditation, if getting blessings in the Mormon church helps you, if going to group therapy or, having a really good therapist helps you, if going to a homeopathic doctor or an MD or crystals or taking a hike in the woods helps you, a swim in the ocean, then do that. And I think that comes from learning how to connect with yourself on some level and feel out what helps you. And sometimes I think that gets lost in the Mormon church, going back to like they own the Holy Ghost and they own the power of God. And so if you can let go of that and realize you can connect with whatever that is yourself on an individual level, then you can find the things in this world that connect with you and help you move towards whatever healing and peace is for you.
Love that too.
I spent a lot of time in my yard. I did a lot of barefoot flower bed gardening and stuff this summer, and I really miss being. I did feel very grounded, and so grounding is a way also of connecting and feeling connected to the earth and to the Creator, to the universe, to God, to whatever those things are that you need to help you to heal, to help you to feel healed inside, even if it's more on a spiritual and emotional, psychological level. I mean, I really, with the cold weather, I've not been doing a lot of barefoot walking in the yard, but I mean, it did a lot of lifting my spirits, I know, all summer to be out there barefoot. So that's
yeah. I loved how Amanda also said about taking a hike. That was actually one of my shelf items. So I used to be a really big whitewater kayaker, and I was going all the time, every weekend, and I was noticing I feel way more connected with, at the time, I would say with God or whatever, than in the temple.
It's
way
just
more.
like less alone,
Yeah.
more a part of everything, and less just being out there floating around on your own.
Yeah. I don't want to cut it short, but I'm surprised that nobody mentioned fortune cookies as in related to blessings. So I definitely am a big believer here. Let me see what we've got. This was going to be for my year going forward here. Let's see. Oh, here we go. I dedicate this to all of us. Okay. Your courage is an inspiration to others. I love that. Look at that. Boom. I believe. I'm a believer.
That's awesome.
I want to thank you guys. Certainly, if anyone has anything like, oh, I wish I would have said that, certainly take a moment. Is there anything else on your minds regarding priesthood blessings, or just ways that we should, what a priesthood blessing is, or what it's not, or anything like that?
It's not necessary.
Yeah. And we ought not, so, okay, let me ask it this way. The next time you are in need, or your child is in need, would you accept it? Would you seek it? Or are you just 50-50 on that whole thing, referring to a priesthood blessing?
Well, I just wouldn't seek out anyone in the church.
You wouldn't seek it, but if someone offered it, would you accept it?
No, because I have other sources and places I'm getting it that are working and intuitively align with me in such a better way that it would be, I think just the connection to bad history with the church, I wouldn't find value with it, because I personally, because it's not just about the giver, it's about the receiver.
Right.
I just don't. I don't want anything from the church again, on any level.
Yeah.
So I would be, but also I found resources that are so abundant that it's from outside of the church that it's already dwarfed my experience in the church as far as spirituality and blessings. So I'm not. I can't foresee a situation happening where I would be, oh please, or even if some well-meaning person came, I'd be like, okay, because they're giving priesthood to everybody, whether they know how to give a blessing, have any level of spirituality at all. If they turn a certain age, you get it, even if you have no idea what to do with it and have no even intuition to spiritually know what to do with it. And that's ridiculous.
Everybody who's a male.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Let's not forget.
And so many that are just these intuitive healers. Yeah, you're not. No, sorry, wrong genitalia.
So I would say for me, I'm in the point that I would accept anything, I think, from probably anyone. When my wife was in the hospital, I no longer believed it. But I wouldn't, if someone says, hey, there was actually a, what's that called in the hospital? A chaplain came around and she said, hey, can I pray with you? I said, absolutely, come on in. She gave a beautiful prayer. And so I wouldn't turn away, if someone said, hey, I want to give you a blessing. For me right now, I'd say, go knock yourself out. But I don't believe that it would be any more powerful or more beneficial than any of the other things we're talking about, maybe even including my fortune cookie. So guys, I told you we would try to keep it to an hour. It's been an hour and 25 minutes, but I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. This has felt like a great Bishop's interview because I learned so much from you guys. And let's face it, that's usually how it is anyways. Even though the Bishop, he gets to act like he's in charge, he's certainly not. So thank you guys for leading the discussion. And hopefully you'll all come back again. And thanks to our viewers, and catch you next time on another Hot Takes. Thanks, guys.
Night.